18-year-old Dwight DJ Grant's parents knew something was wrong.
And I just looked at the camera for the office, and I saw two people hurting my son, and there's...
You can't get away with nothing! Jesus! There's cameras everywhere.
October 17th, 2021, 7:14 p.m. Security cameras capture 18-year-old Dwight Grant carrying a 17-year-old girl on his back, both laughing as they approach a stairwell in Miramar, Florida. Minutes later, the boy who mentored younger students like a big brother would be dead. This is the story of what those cameras saw. The security camera timestamp reads October 17th, 2021, 7:14 p.m. The grainy footage shows an 18-year-old boy carrying a girl on his back across an apartment complex walkway in Miramar, Florida. They're laughing. He's grinning. She's holding on. Playful. Relaxed. Just feet from his front door, Dwight Grant, everyone called him DJ, was 18, a senior at the local high school where he played in the band. The kind of kid who carried younger students on his back. Not just that night, but every day. A mentor, an older brother figure to underclassmen who looked up to him. Christy Parisian was 17, one of those younger students. Someone DJ had guided through the band program. Treated like a little sister. That October evening, he gave her a piggyback ride across the concrete walkway near Sherman Circle North, both of them lit by the fading Florida daylight. Nothing in that frame suggests these are the last minutes of his life. The footage is mundane. A teenager helping out a friend. The kind of moment that wouldn't make you look twice. But security cameras don't choose what matters. They just record everything and wait. DJ carried Christy toward the stairwell at the corner of the building. His stride was easy, unhurried. The timestamp ticked forward. 7:14 p.m. became 7:15 p.m. Hold that detail in mind. 18 years old. A kid who mentored younger band members. Who played music. Who lived with his family in the building where he'd grown up. A boy who carried people literally and figuratively. Someone who trusted easily. Laughed freely. Opened his door to friends without a second thought. How does trust become a weapon when you're the one carrying it on your back?
She was the last person who saw him.
The camera angle is fixed, wide. It captures the walkway. The stairwell entrance. The dim concrete corners where the building's lights don't quite reach. DJ and Christy move toward that corner. The frame holds them for a few more seconds. Then they step out of view. The camera keeps recording. It always does. Security systems don't stop when people disappear from the frame. They keep their silent watch. Hard drive filling with hours of empty walkways and nothing. October 17th, 2021. Evening in Miramar. A boy carries a girl on his back, both of them laughing, and the camera sees it all. Days would pass before anyone thought to pull that footage. Days before investigators would rewind to 7:14 p.m. and watch that piggyback ride frame by frame, looking for the moment everything changed. By then, DJ's phone would be silent. By then, his mother would have called and gotten no response. By then, the only person who could explain what happened in that stairwell would already be sitting in the back of a police car, laughing about being caught on camera. But on October 17th, at 7:14 p.m., the camera just watched. It didn't know that the boy in the frame, grinning, helpful, kind, would never walk back out. It recorded him carrying her in. It kept recording after they disappeared. Hours of footage. Empty walkway. Timestamp advancing. The camera kept its vigil, and no one thought to look. While the camera kept its silent watch, someone else was already searching. The texts sat unanswered on Majamil's phone screen. One at 9:47 p.m., another at 10:15, a third at 10:52, each one reaching for her son in the silence where his voice should be. Majamil knew the shape of her son's life better than any missing person form could capture. And when DJ went silent that October evening, she knew before anyone would believe her that something was deeply, irreversibly wrong. She called. The phone went straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. Again. That automated tone, that mechanical voice inviting her to leave a message DJ would never hear. This wasn't like him. DJ always answered, always checked in, always let her know where he was, who he was with, when he'd be home. 18 years old, and still considerate enough to text back within minutes. To pick up on the second ring. To never leave his mother waiting in the dark wondering. The apartment felt too quiet. The hours stretched too long. She tried again. 9:47. 10. 15. 10:52. And each time the call dropped straight into that empty digital void where her son's voice should be. Keep that pattern in mind. Madge didn't wait for morning. Didn't wait for the usual 24-hour window police department's site for missing adults. Didn't let anyone tell her it was too soon. That teenage boys sometimes stay out late. That he probably turned his phone off and would show up sheepish by breakfast. She reported him missing that same night. This wasn't normal. This wasn't DJ. He didn't disappear. He didn't go silent. He didn't turn his phone off and vanish into the Miramar night without a word to the mother who'd raised him to always check in. Mothers know the shape of their children's lives better than any time frame on a missing person form. The police took the report. A mother's worry. Documented. An 18-year-old's name entered into the system. But worry isn't evidence, and a few unanswered texts don't trigger search parties. Young men are allowed to be unreachable for a night. The system would wait. Madge couldn't. She kept calling, kept texting. The phone screen glowed with her messages, blue bubbles stacking up unanswered in the dark. Where are you? Call me. DJ, please. The kind of messages a mother sends when instinct is screaming louder than logic. When the absence of a voice means more than anyone else can understand. She was right to be afraid. The reason she was right was sitting 200 feet away in the stairwell at the corner of the building. In the concrete shadows where the camera had watched DJ disappear hours earlier. Right there. Close enough that if she'd walked outside, if she'd looked in the right direction, if someone had thought to check that dim corner where nothing ever happened. But no one had thought to check. Not yet. Not while his mother sat holding a phone that would never ring again, sending texts that would never be read, calling a number that would only answer with silence. The camera had recorded it all. The mother had felt it all. Neither could make anyone look, while Madge waited for a phone that would never ring. 3 people who knew exactly where DJ was stood around a different fire. The flames beside the lake were small, controlled, fed by 3 pairs of hands pushing black fabric into the heat. Gloves, hoodies, masks disappearing into ash and smoke. Andre Clements III. 17. Had spent weeks planning what jealousy convinced him was justice. Now he stood watching evidence burn, certain he'd thought of everything. Christy fed her hoodie into the flames. The fabric curled and blackened and caught. Jaslyn Smith. 16. Had agreed to help with what she'd told herself was just a fight. But now she stood at a fire, burning the truth of what she'd actually done. behind Jaslin's apartment complex. The lake reflected their small fire. The night air carried the smell of burning cloth and something darker underneath. They didn't speak, just fed the flames methodically, piece by piece. Black fabric holds blood well. Black fabric also burns. They'd worn all black that evening for a reason, to disappear from cameras, to blend into the shadows, to leave nothing visible for anyone watching. Now they were erasing the evidence, reducing every fiber that touched DJ's blood to carbon and smoke. The fire consumed it all. Gloves that had gripped, hoodies that had soaked, the masks they'd pulled over their faces, layer by layer into the flames until nothing was left but embers and ash, and the clean night breeze carrying it away. They believed that was the end. Burn the evidence, wash the blood away, step back through the door into normal life. The fire died down. Embers glowed orange against the dark. They waited until the flames had eaten everything. Until there was nothing left to identify, nothing left to link them to the stairwell where his mother sat waiting. Then they went home. That's the part that's hardest to reconcile. The ease of it. The ordinary transition from murder to Monday night. Andre walked through his front door. Christy walked through hers. Jaslyn slipped back into her apartment building. They greeted family members, washed their hands, changed into clean clothes, climbed into their beds as if nothing had happened. Ordinary teenagers in ordinary houses. Ordinary night in Miramar. The kind of night where mothers text their kids goodnight. Where bathroom lights flick off. Where the quiet settles in and everyone sleeps. Does that sound like panic? Like guilt that would crack them open and spill the truth? They'd planned it, executed it, burned the evidence, and slipped back into their lives like DJ was nothing. The fabric was gone. The blood was gone. The masks that had hidden their faces were reduced to smoke that had already dissipated into the Florida night. They'd thought of everything, except the one thing you can't burn away with a fire beside a lake. The recording that was already saved. Already time-stamped. Already waiting in a security office neither of them knew existed. The camera that had watched Christy climb onto DJ's back at 7:14 p.m. That footage didn't need fabric to survive. It just needed no one to erase it. And no one had. The recording sat waiting while Madge called the police again. By morning, she'd made 2 more calls. Each time, hearing the same careful patience. The same suggestion to wait. The same unspoken message that 18-year-old boys missing one night rarely stay missing. DJ's phone still went straight to voicemail. The texts sat unanswered. And the police kept telling her to give it time. Time. As if waiting wouldn't matter. The officer on the line was professional. Sympathetic even. Missing person report already filed. They understood her concern. But young adults sometimes stay out without calling home. Sometimes turn their phones off. Give it until evening. He'll probably walk through the door apologetic. She tried to explain. This wasn't like him. DJ always called back, always responded, always let her know where he was. But every parent says that. The system has heard it 10,000 times. Most missing persons come home within 24 hours. Most. Not all. The police would look when it became urgent. When the hours stretched past reasonable. When the absence crossed from unusual into undeniable. But that threshold hadn't been reached yet. One night, not enough to trigger searches or alerts, or the kind of attention that might actually find him. Madge hung up, knowing they wouldn't look. Not yet. The apartment felt too quiet. Daylight through the windows marked time passing morning into afternoon, hours stacking up, each one taking DJ further from the moment he'd disappeared. She couldn't just sit there. The system was designed to move slowly, to wait for evidence, to not panic at every parent's fear. But the system didn't know what she knew about her son, so she stopped waiting for someone else to care as much as she did. Her apartment complex had security cameras, mounted above walkways, angled at doors, covering the outdoor spaces where residents came and went. Those cameras ran constantly, day and night, recording everything. If the police wouldn't look at the footage yet, she would. The last time anyone had seen DJ was Sunday evening. He'd left the apartment, probably met up with friends. Someone had to have seen him. And if someone saw him, the cameras might have too. She thought about where the cameras were positioned. The walkways, the stairwells, the corners of the building where her son had lived his entire life. Those cameras were still recording, still saving everything to drives that would keep the footage for days, maybe weeks, before newer files overwrote them. If DJ had come home that night, if he'd walked through the complex toward their apartment, the cameras would have seen him. If something had happened to him here, if someone had hurt him, stopped him from making it to his door, the cameras might have seen that too. She didn't know what she'd find. Didn't know if building management would let her see the footage or tell her she needed something official she didn't have. But she couldn't wait anymore. So she stopped waiting for the police to look. She decided to look herself, starting with the one thing every apartment complex keeps running, day and night, recording everything that happens outside every door. She had no idea how much those cameras had already captured. Before the cameras, she checked his phone records. The call log showed 17 outgoing calls in the days before he disappeared. And Madge scrolled through every name, every timestamp, searching for the last person who'd heard her son's voice alive. The list was mundane. Friends from school, his father, her. A few numbers she didn't recognize, classmates, maybe, or kids from the band program where DJ spent afternoons mentoring younger students. She kept scrolling, looking for something that stood out. A number called repeatedly, a contact that didn't belong, anything that might tell her where he'd gone that Sunday evening. October 17th, 7:12 p.m. 2 minutes before the security camera timestamp she didn't know about yet. Christy Parisienne. Madge stopped scrolling. She knew that name immediately. Christy was one of the younger kids from the school band someone DJ had mentored, treated like a little sister. Madge had seen her at concerts, had watched DJ help her carry equipment, had heard him talk about the underclassmen he was guiding through the program. A nice girl, polite, the kind of teenager who called adults ma'am and smiled easily. The kind DJ would absolutely help if she needed something. Madge stared at the name on the screen. Christy had called DJ at 7:12 p.m. on October 17th. The call lasted 43 seconds. Not long. Just enough to ask for something. Maybe. A ride. Help. Did Christy know where DJ had gone after that? Had she seen him that night? The name sat there in the call log, waiting. The last person DJ had spoken to before his phone went dark. Madge thought about reaching out to Christy, asking if she'd seen DJ, if he'd mentioned where he was going, if anything might help locate him now. But the name didn't frighten her. Why would it? Truth doesn't always announce itself with unfamiliar names. Sometimes it hides behind the faces you already know, the ones you've welcomed into your home, the ones who've smiled at your son across music stands. Christy was someone Madge trusted. That was the problem. The answer was right there. The call at 7:12 p.m. 43 seconds connecting DJ to the person who would help lure him into a stairwell 2 minutes later. But trust is excellent camouflage. A familiar name feels safe. A girl DJ mentored couldn't possibly be a threat. So Madge looked past it. Not ignoring it, just filing it away as a lead to follow up later. After she checked the more obvious places first. After she looked at the security cameras. After she talked to police again. Christy's name didn't set off alarms because the people who hurt us aren't always strangers. Sometimes they're the ones we've already let in. The ones our children trust. It would be another day before Madge understood what that call log was actually telling her. Another day before she connected Christy Parisian's name to the girl on the security footage climbing onto DJ's back at 7:14 p.m. Another day before she realized the last person her son called was the same person he'd carried toward the stairwell where he died. But first, she had to see what the cameras saw. And the cameras had seen everything. Christy's name sat in the call log, waiting to mean something. But first, Madge needed to see the cameras. The security office sat in a corner of the apartment complex's main building, and she stood at the counter asking to see footage from the night of October 17th, the night her son's phone went silent. The building manager handled the security office, had access to all the footage the cameras captured, and saw nothing unusual about a mother wanting to track her missing son's last movements. Missing person cases happened. Security footage helped, Madge explained quickly. Her son, DJ, 18 years old, hadn't come home Sunday night. Phone going straight to voicemail. Last seen that evening. She needed to know if the cameras had captured him anywhere in the complex coming home. Leaving. Talking to someone. Anything that might tell her where he'd gone. The manager nodded. Professional concern crossed his face. He gestured to the monitor screens behind the counter. Multiple camera feeds tiled across the displays. The system recorded everything. If DJ had been in view of any camera that night, it would be there. He sat down at the console, pulled up the archive. Keyboard clicks punctuated the hum of office equipment. October 17th. Evening. What time? 7 p.m., Madge said. Around then. The timeline that mattered was narrower than she knew. 7:14 p.m. The piggyback ride. The stairwell. But she didn't know about that timestamp yet. She just knew DJ had stopped answering his phone sometime Sunday evening. The manager scrolled through camera feeds, timestamps flickering past. Walkways, entrances, parking areas. The apartment complex captured everything in grainy black and white. There's a safety in not knowing. A space between asking the question and hearing the answer, where hope can still live untouched. Madge stood behind the counter, watching him search. Part of her expected to see DJ walking through a frame somewhere, alive and fine, heading toward a friend's car maybe. The footage would show him leaving safely. She'd have a direction to search. She thought she was about to find out where her son had gone. She wasn't prepared for what "where he went" actually meant. The manager's hand paused on the mouse. There, camera 3, walkway near the stairwell. He enlarged the feed. Grainy footage filled the screen. A boy carrying a girl on his back. Timestamp, October 17th, 2021, 7:14 p.m. Madge leaned forward. That was DJ. She recognized him instantly. His stride, his build, the way he moved even in low-resolution black and white. And the girl on his back, laughing, holding on. Her son. Helping someone. Being the kid she'd raised him to be.
And I just looked at the camera for the office and I saw two people hurting my son and there's
Madge Emile would spend the rest of her life wishing he hadn't. What she was about to see would turn investigation into evidence and fear into certainty. The screen would show her exactly where her son had gone that night. and he'd never left. The screen came alive with grainy footage. Timestamp, 7:14 p.m. There was her son, alive, laughing, carrying a girl on his back across the walkway. Madge had walked 1,000 times. DJ. His face clear enough to recognize. Christy Parisian on his back. Both heading toward the stairwell. Madge leaned closer. The footage continued. DJ and Christy approached the stairwell entrance. Then movement from the shadows. 2 figures emerged from the corner where they'd been waiting, positioned exactly where DJ and Christy would pass. A planned ambush. One grabbed DJ. His body jerked, pulled sideways. Christy dropped off his back. DJ was fighting, his hands reaching for the wall, fingers trying to grip concrete as 2 attackers dragged him toward the corner. The camera couldn't capture sound, but Madge could see the struggle. Her son trying to escape. His fingers visibly pried off the wall as they pulled him into the stairwell. And Christy. Christy didn't run, didn't scream, didn't try to stop them. She stood there, watching, standing guard while Andre and another attacker dragged DJ into a stairwell he would never walk out of. The girl he'd mentored, the last person he'd called, the one Madge had trusted. She wasn't a victim. She was part of it. This is what evidence looks like when the evidence is your child's last moments. Not facts in a file, but a son who will never walk back through that door. Before we hear what Madge said on that 911 call, comment A if you think Christy planned this from the start. Or B if she was manipulated into it. Add one reason in 5 to 10 words. This is where a mother's fear becomes evidence. Please note what follows contains recreated details for narrative purposes, based on documented facts. Madge's hand shook as she reached for her phone. The footage kept playing behind her. She dialed 911. Officer Espirito Santo from Miramar PD took the call that would turn a missing person case into a murder investigation. Madge's voice broke. "So my son has been missing since Sunday," she said. The words came out shaking, urgent. "I just looked at the camera for the office, and I saw 2 people hurting my son." The footage was still playing. DJ still on screen. Still fighting. Still trying to hold on to a wall he'd never escape. She told the officer about Christy, the girl on her son's back. The girl who didn't run. The girl who stood watch. And she was the last person who saw him. Not the last person to see him alive. The last person who saw him. Madge had wanted the police to look. For 2 days she'd pleaded for someone to take her seriously. Now she was the one who had to make them believe it. Standing in a security office with her son still frozen on the screen behind her. Fingers still reaching for a wall. Still trying to escape an attack that had already ended. The call would bring them. But what they found would be worse than what the camera showed. They believed her. Yellow tape stretched across the walkway outside the apartment building, pulled tight by officers who'd arrived minutes after the 911 call. And somewhere behind that perimeter, Madge Emile waited for confirmation of what the footage had already shown her. Officer Espirito Santo moved through the scene methodically. Multiple officers from Miramar PD responded to secure what had become a murder scene, marking evidence and documenting the blood trail no one had noticed for 2 days. Blood on the stairs. Blood on the concrete walkway. Blood marking the path where DJ had tried to escape, where his fingers had been pried off the wall. The evidence was everywhere. On steps. On walls. On the ground. 2 days. The stairwell had sat undisturbed while residents walked past, while Madge called police begging them to look. "There's blood everywhere," one officer said, voice tight. Another looked at the stairs. At the concrete. Nobody noticed all that blood under the stairs, but no one had looked. No one had thought to check the stairwell at the corner of the building, the dim concrete space where nothing ever happened. Police radios crackled as officers called for additional units. The crime scene was larger than expected, 200 feet. The distance between the stairwell where he died and the apartment where his mother waited. The distance between a crime scene and a home that would never be the same. While officers documented the blood trail, another unit moved to secure the building's perimeter. Standard procedure. Make sure nothing was disturbed. No evidence missed. That's when they found him. DJ's body was in the bushes outside the building. Not hidden, not buried, not concealed. Just dumped. Discarded in the landscaping feet from his own front door. He'd been there for 2 days. 2 days while his mother walked these same walkways searching for him. Calling his phone. Reporting him missing. 2 days while she stood at windows looking out over the complex. He'd been within steps of where she walked. The killers hadn't tried to hide him. Hadn't driven the body somewhere remote. Hadn't attempted to cover their tracks beyond burning their clothes. They'd just thrown him in the bushes like trash and walked away. The disposal wasn't about concealment. It was about discard. Does that sound like panic? Like remorse? Like someone who didn't mean for it to go this far? Officers secured the area. Yellow tape circled wider. The scene expanded from stairwell to walkway to bushes. Each marker documenting evidence that had sat untouched while an 18-year-old's mother begged someone to look. Madge stood just outside the tape, close enough to see the activity, close enough to know they'd found him, far enough that no one had to tell her what the officers' faces already confirmed. For everyone at that scene, the question filling the air was, who? Who could do this to an 18-year-old just feet from his own door? For Madge. Standing just outside the tape, there was only one name, and she already knew it went to his school. The footage had given them a face. Now they needed to confirm the name. Madge had given them the name. Now investigators had to confirm it. The girl on the footage matched the name in DJ's call log, Christy Parisienne. 17. A student at Miramar High School. Same address Madge had seen on school directories. Detectives working the case cross-referenced every piece of evidence footage. Phone records. Addresses building the web that would close around 3 teenagers. The security camera showed Christy climbing onto DJ's back at 7:14 p.m. The phone records showed DJ calling Christy at 7:12 p.m. 2 minutes between the call and the piggyback ride. 2 forms of evidence pointing to the same 17-year-old. And then the footage showed her standing guard while 2 attackers dragged DJ into the stairwell. Not a victim. Not a witness. Part of it. Police pulled Christy's address and raced to her house. The evidence was clear. The identification solid. They had her on camera. In the call log, connected to DJ's last moments alive. Time to bring her in. But when detectives arrived at Christy's home in Miramar, knocked on the door, waited for someone to answer, Christy wasn't there. Christy's mother answered the door to police asking about her daughter. Hours before she'd understand why they were there. Confused, concerned at seeing detectives on her doorstep, her daughter wasn't home. Where was she? Gone to the police station, her mother said. Christy had left a message saying she was going to make a statement about something that happened. Her mother didn't know what, just that Christy said she needed to talk to police. Not fleeing. Not hiding. Approaching. Christy Parisienne had driven herself to the station, walked in on her own. Asked to speak with someone about a case. Sat down, ready to tell her version of what happened 2 nights ago on October 17th. 2 mothers. One who'd just watched her son die on camera, one about to learn her daughter had stood watch while it happened. The detectives exchanged glances. Christy didn't know they had footage. Didn't know Madge had found the security office. Didn't know investigators had already watched her climb onto DJ's back. Stand guard while he was attacked. Walk away while he bled in the stairwell. She thought she was controlling the narrative. Coming forward looked cooperative. Making a statement before being asked looked innocent. Whatever story she'd prepared, whatever version she'd rehearsed, with whoever helped her plan this, she believed it would work. Does that sound like panic? Like guilt that would crack under the weight of what she'd done? She was 17 years old, and she was walking into a police station confident that the adults in the room would believe whatever she was about to say. The detectives headed back to the station. Fast. Christy Parisienne wasn't running from the police. She was driving toward them, toward the station, toward the interrogation room, toward the detectives who just watched her stand guard on camera while DJ Grant fought for his life. She had a story to tell. A version where she wasn't guilty, where she could explain, where they'd understand, and she was certain they would believe it. She had no idea they'd already seen the truth.
Okay.
There's blood everywhere. Nope.
While Christy Parisienne drove toward the police station with her prepared story, detectives knocked on a different door. Jaslyn Smith's house, where a 16-year-old girl and her mother were about to face what 2 days of silence had been hiding. Jaslyn's mother had watched enough true crime shows to know her daughter couldn't get away with anything once cameras were involved. And she demanded truth from her 16-year-old the moment police appeared at their door. The detectives explained why they were there. A murder investigation. October 17th. Security footage showing multiple attackers. Jaslyn's face changed. Fear. Then admission. Her mother's voice cut through before the detectives could ask their first question. I need honesty from you. Not a request. A command. Jaslyn started talking. Not to the detectives. To her mother. She admitted she was there. Admitted she helped. Claimed Andre had told her he needed backup for a fight. Just a fight. And she'd believed him. I was just told to push him and make sure he stayed in a corner, Jaslyn said.
I was just told to push him and make sure he stayed in a corner.
A corner. As if DJ had been a problem to contain, not a person to protect. She admitted she'd held the weapon during the attack. Admitted she'd restrained him, but kept insisting she thought it was just supposed to be a fight. Andre hadn't told her they were planning murder. The detectives listened, took notes, let her talk. But the most effective interrogator in that room wasn't the detective with a badge. It was the mother who'd raised that girl and knew the exact tone of voice that meant stop lying to me. Jaslyn's mother pressed harder. Asked the questions detectives were still formulating. Demanded details Jaslyn didn't want to give. And then she said the words that cracked whatever story Jaslyn had been holding together. You can't get away with nothing. There's cameras everywhere. True crime shows. Documentaries about murders solved by security footage. Jaslyn's mother had watched them all. She knew how this worked. Knew that cameras caught everything. And she knew her daughter had been foolish enough to think she wouldn't be seen. Jaslyn kept talking. Kept admitting. Kept trying to frame it as something she'd been pulled into. Something she hadn't fully understood until it was too late. Just a fight. Just backup. Just holding him in a corner. Just standing in a stairwell while an 18-year-old bled out feet from his own front door. The detectives had come prepared to interrogate a suspect.
A life was taken. It was the highest crime you could possibly commit.
Instead, they watched a mother extract a confession faster than any technique they'd been trained to use. Does that sound like a teenage girl who didn't know what she was doing? Or someone who knew exactly what happened and was workshopping. Which version sounded most forgivable? Jaslyn admitted her role, admitted the weapon, admitted being there, holding DJ down, keeping him in that corner. Her mother stood there, taking it in the worst news a parent can hear, delivered by the child who'd been hiding it for 2 days. She thought the worst part was what her daughter had done. Holding a boy down, holding a weapon, standing in a stairwell while someone died. She hadn't yet heard how little her daughter thought any of it mattered. But Christie's version of events would make Jaslyn's look like brutal honesty. Jaslyn's mother would soon learn just how little it mattered to them. Christie Parisian sat in the interrogation room for the second time, and the air was different now. Colder, tighter. The detective across from her holding a folder she hadn't seen during her first helpful witness performance days earlier. The detective conducting Christie's second interrogation had read every text message, knew every lie she'd told in her first statement, and watched her face carefully as the folder of evidence opened between them. Christie's demeanor shifted. She'd walked in confident, the same energy she'd brought to her first interview when she played the innocent friend who'd witnessed something terrible. But the detective's expression stopped her mid-breath. Something had changed. They knew. The folder opened. Printed text messages spread across the table between them. Weeks of conversations. Messages between Christie, Andre, and Jaslyn. Planning. Coordinating. Anticipating. The detective read Christie's own words back to her. "I'm going to get a pedicure and paint my nails red to match the blood." Sent days before October 17th. Before DJ's blood existed. Before the stairwell, before the attack. Just a girl texting about murder like it was a prom theme. The detective kept reading. Andre's messages. "A murder is going to happen soon. Not a threat, not hyperbole, a plan." Weeks. They'd spent weeks planning this, texting about it, coordinating logistics, documenting their intent on phones they thought were private, conversations they believed would disappear into the scroll of daily life. The phone in her pocket when she typed those texts was the same phone that would put her in prison. Teenagers treating murder like a group project, planning it in threads they'd scroll past memes to read. Christie's careful witness story, the version where she was shocked, where she didn't know what Andre was planning, where she was just a friend giving DJ a piggyback ride, died in the silence that followed. Every text exposed the lie. Every message proved premeditation. This wasn't a fight gone wrong. This wasn't impulsive teenage violence. This was planned, discussed, anticipated. The detective's voice stayed measured, professional, reading Christie's own words. Andre's confirmations. The group chat documenting intent. Does that sound like someone who got pulled into something they didn't understand? Or someone who knew exactly what was going to happen because they'd been planning it for weeks? The detective read one more line, not from the texts, from the record. A life was taken. It was the highest crime you could possibly commit. Christie sat across from evidence she couldn't explain away, couldn't reframe, couldn't spin into a version where she was anything but exactly what the texts proved her to be. Someone who'd painted her nails red weeks before DJ's blood existed. Typed it into a phone like it was a joke, a dare, a game. Now that same phone, the one she'd used to coordinate a murder, like it was Friday night plans, the one where she'd casually mentioned matching her pedicure to the blood she knew would come, was the reason she'd never paint her nails anywhere but a cell. But the coldest evidence wasn't on paper. It was on audio no one knew was recording. The phone had captured their plans. Now another recording was capturing their priorities. Christie's voice carried through the darkness of the cruiser backseat. Mid-thought about the surveillance footage, worried about which camera had caught them. Jaslyn listened, anxious. Following her lead, the way she'd followed it into a stairwell 3 nights earlier. They thought the interrogation was over, thought they were safely away from police ears. Finally, alone in the back of a transport vehicle heading toward the Juvenile Assessment Center in Fort Lauderdale, the girls believed this was the first private conversation they'd had since October 17th. They were wrong. Christy talked about the cameras, which one, where, what angle it might have captured. Nervous speculation about what the footage actually showed. Jaslyn asked questions. Worried questions. What did you say? What did I say? Did we admit too much? Christy reassured her. They hadn't said anything too bad. Nothing that couldn't be explained. The footage was grainy. The camera was far away. They'd been wearing black, but they kept coming back to it. The camera. The footage. Being caught. What the police knew versus what they could prove. The conversation circled. Replayed. Combined notes on interrogations. On what each had admitted. On whether their stories matched enough. Fear masked as strategy. Anxiety dressed up as problem-solving. 2 teenage girls workshopping how much trouble they were actually in. They talked about evidence, about cameras catching everything, about being seen, being recorded, being caught on footage they hadn't known existed. They worried about which camera had the clearest view, whether the angle showed faces, whether wearing all black had actually helped or just made them more suspicious. The entire ride. Cameras, footage, evidence. What we said. What they know. What they can prove. Not once did they mention Dwight Grant. Not once did they say his name. Not DJ. Not the boy. Not what happened. Not what we did. Not who we hurt. Just the camera. The footage. Being caught. The cruiser kept moving through Fort Lauderdale. The girls kept talking, kept worrying about surveillance angles and interrogation transcripts and whether they'd covered their tracks well enough. Never about the 18-year-old who'd carried one of them on his back. Never about the stairwell. Never about the blood. Never about the body dumped in bushes feet from his own front door. Only about getting caught. Does that sound like remorse? Like guilt that would keep them awake at night? The cruiser arrived at the Juvenile Assessment Center. Officers opened the back doors. Christy and Jaslyn stepped out, still mid-conversation about evidence and cameras and what version of events they should stick to. As they were escorted inside, the transport vehicle sat empty in the lot. Standard police cruiser, equipped for juvenile transport. Equipped with audio and video recording. Every word they'd spoken had been captured. Every worry about being caught on camera, recorded by the camera they'd forgotten to consider. The entire ride, their priorities, their concerns, their complete absence of remorse documented on a system they didn't know was running. They'd spent the whole ride worried about which camera had caught them. They never once mentioned the boy, while they worried about cameras. The case was already closing. Andre Clements III walked through the station doors alone. October 2021. Both girls were in custody. The arrest warrant had been issued. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, text messages, confessions, the cruiser recording. Andre turned himself into Miramar Police Department. No chase, no drama, no last-minute attempt to flee or hide or explain. He walked in and surrendered. All 3 now faced first-degree murder charges. All 3 had been caught by the cameras they'd tried to avoid. Convicted by the phones they'd used to plan it. Exposed by the words they'd spoken when they thought no one was listening.
Why me though?
The legal machinery moved efficiently once they stopped lying. Andre pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, 40 years in prison. Lifelong probation after release. Christy pleaded guilty. 25 years. 10 years probation. Jaslyn pleaded guilty. 25 years. 10 years probation. The arithmetic was simple. Andre would be 57 before he could ask for freedom. Christy and Jaslyn would be in their 40s. Decades of their lives traded for the minutes it took to kill Dwight Grant in a stairwell. The courtroom processed the pleas with professional detachment. Charges read. Guilt admitted. Sentences handed down. The system doing what it was designed to do when the evidence left no room for doubt. 3 teenagers. 3 guilty pleas. 90 years of combined prison time. Not one mention of his name in that cruiser. The sentences were long. 40 years is a lifetime. 25 years is a generation. The numbers were meant to match the severity of what they'd done. Planned. Coordinated. Executed a murder they texted about like it was weekend plans. But the sentence that carried the most weight didn't come from the judge. It came from the 2 people who had the most reason to refuse. DJ's family stood in that courtroom, faced the 3 who'd taken Dwight Grant from them, and spoke. Not about vengeance. Not about how long 40 years feels, or whether 25 is enough. Not about the security footage, or the text messages, or the cruiser recording that captured 2 girls laughing about being caught, while never once mentioning the boy they'd killed. They spoke about DJ. Their words didn't demand punishment. The justice system had already handled that. Their presence in that courtroom, their willingness to stand there and speak while Andre Christie and Jaslyn sat listening, said more than any sentence could. Does that sound like forgiveness, like mercy the 3 had earned? It was grace. The kind that costs everything to give and nothing to receive. The kind that exposes the gap between what someone deserves and what they're given anyway. 40 years for Andre. 25 each for Christy and Jaslyn. The judge's sentences were final. Documented. Legally binding. But the sentence that mattered most, the one that would follow them through every year behind bars. Every appeal denied. Every parole hearing where they'd have to explain what they'd done came from the people who had every reason to stay silent. DJ's family spoke. Not about punishment. About the boy they never mentioned. They spoke about DJ. And then they made a choice that would define what mercy looks like in the face of murder. The judge asked Madge Emile if she would consent to the plea. Andre's 40-year sentence only happened because DJ's parents agreed to it. The plea deal required their approval. Not a formality. An actual decision they had to make. They could have refused. They could have forced a trial, made Andre face a jury, made him sit through weeks of testimony about what he'd planned. Coordinated. Ordered done to an 18-year-old boy who'd never hurt anyone. They could have made him answer for every text message, every surveillance frame, every second of cruiser audio where the girls he'd recruited laughed about being caught without once mentioning the victim. They said yes. Not because Andre deserved it. Not because 40 years felt like enough. Not because they'd forgiven what he'd done, but because a trial meant months more of reliving October 17th. Meant hearing evidence they'd already seen. Meant watching their son die on camera again while lawyers argued over details that wouldn't change the outcome. They gave the boy who ordered their son's death something he never gave Dwight Grant. A choice. A chance. Mercy. 40 years in prison is not freedom. But it was more than DJ got on that stairwell. More than the seconds he had to fight. To hold on to a wall. To try to escape attackers who'd been waiting for him. He never asked DJ. They said yes anyway. The legal system processed their consent with professional efficiency. Plea accepted. Sentencing date set. the machinery moving forward because the people with the most right to demand a reckoning had chosen not to. Does that sound like weakness? Like parents who didn't love their son enough to make his killers suffer? Or does it sound like people who understood that no sentence 40 years, 400 years, life without parole would bring DJ back? Madge and DJ's father left the courthouse after the proceedings concluded. The sentences had been handed down, the pleas accepted. The three who'd planned and executed a murder were going to prison for decades. And then they went home. Same apartment. Same building on Pembroke Road in Miramar. Same complex where DJ had lived his entire life. Where he'd walked those walkways every day. Where he'd carried Christy on his back toward a stairwell that was supposed to be safe. The view from their window hadn't changed. They could still see it. The corner of the building. The stairwell where their son had bled out. The bushes where his body had been dumped. Feet from his own front door. Right there. Every time they looked outside. Every morning, every evening. Every single day. They gave mercy to the boy who'd ordered their son's murder. Consented to a plea deal that would send him to prison for 40 years. Then they went home to the apartment overlooking the exact stairwell where Dwight Grant took his last breath. That view. Every single day. The ending was written in that geography. Every day. Madge sees the stairwell from her window. The corner of the building where her son took his last breath. The geography of loss, measured in feet, she can count from her kitchen. But the story doesn't end there. It begins where it always began on camera. October 17th, 2021. The security camera timestamp reads 7:14 p.m. Ainley footage shows an 18-year-old boy carrying a girl on his back across an apartment complex walkway in Miramar, Florida. Both of them laughing. Both of them heading toward a stairwell. Dwight Grant. DJ. The last time anyone saw him breathing on camera. The footage captured what would happen next. The ambush. The attack. Christy standing guard while Andre and Jaslyn dragged DJ into that corner. His fingers pried off the wall. His body left in bushes, feet from his own front door. But the cameras also captured what happened after. The text messages planning it weeks in advance. Christy joking about painting her nails red to match the blood before the blood existed. Andre announcing a murder like it was an event to RSVP for. Group chats documenting intent like they were coordinating a party. The interrogation footage. Jaslyn's mother extracting a confession faster than any detective. Christy's careful witness story collapsing under printed texts. The cruiser recording. Two girls laughing about being caught on camera during the entire ride to juvenile detention. Never once mentioning DJ. How do you laugh about being caught on camera and never mention the boy you killed? How do teenagers plan a murder over text messages? Execute it in a stairwell. Dump the body in bushes. Burn their clothes. And then worry more about surveillance angles than the life they took. Some questions don't have answers, only evidence. DJ was 18 years old, a senior, a band student who mentored younger kids, who carried people on his back, literally and figuratively, someone who trusted easily, who helped friends without asking why, who opened doors and gave piggyback rides and answered phone calls at 7:12 p.m. from people he thought he could trust. He was a son who always called home. A boy who lived in the same apartment his entire life. Someone whose last act of kindness was carrying a girl who'd lured him to his death. That's who Dwight Grant was. That's what was lost on October 17th, 2021, in a stairwell in Miramar. Andre got 40 years. Christy and Jaslyn got 25 each. DJ's parents gave mercy and went home to a view that would never change. The legal system processed pleas and handed down sentences and moved on to the next case. And the cameras kept recording, kept their silent watch over walkways and stairwells and corners where nothing is supposed to happen, until it does. They dressed in black to disappear from the cameras, wore dark clothes to blend into shadows, to avoid being seen, to leave no visible trace for anyone watching. But in the end, the cameras were the only ones telling the truth, the only witnesses who captured every moment, the only ones who never looked away. Ending Tay. Dwight Grant's story reminds us that violence can shatter lives in an instant, leaving families forever changed. An 18-year-old who mentored younger students, who trusted easily, who offered kindness without hesitation, gone because of a plan hatched in text messages and carried out in a Miramar stairwell. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about how quickly trust can be weaponized, how easily teenagers can cross lines they can never uncross. 3 young people turned murder into casual conversation, painting nails red to match the blood they planned to spill. The contrast between DJ's final act of kindness, a piggyback ride caught on camera, and the violence that followed remains haunting. If this story affected you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Notorious Crimes for more deep dives into real cases that shaped communities and destroyed families. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What stood out to you most about this case? Your engagement helps these stories reach others who want to understand the real impact of violent crime. Thank you for watching and for treating this tragedy with the respect it deserves. This story is based on a real case that took Dwight Grant's life in October 2021. Some scenes have been dramatized for storytelling purposes, but the core facts remain true to what happened. Our thoughts are with DJ's family, friends, and everyone who knew the young man whose life ended too soon.